MVP Promotions' Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson boxing fight is next week, and if you're getting forced to watch it, or maybe you're new to MVP Promotions or boxing, I'm going to give you the rundown. All right, let's get into the details here. So this fight is at heavyweight, which is 200 pounds. There are some slight rule changes that aren't typical for boxing. These are going to be 2-minute rounds instead of the longer 3-minute rounds, and they are 14-ounce gloves. This fight is through MVP Promotions, which is Jake Paul's promotional company that he started back in 2021, and they have partnered with Netflix for this card. And this is so interesting to me because it's so difficult to break into the promotional space and become a true competitor. It requires so much money, and so many promotions have not been able to do it effectively. In order to become a true competitor, you need so much capital to be able to pay your fighters well, more than your competitors, and to be able to spend a colossal amount of money on marketing and hosting the events, which is very, very hard to do if you're a new promotion. However, Netflix does have that kind of money, so by partnering with Netflix, Jake Paul is creating something very new in the space, and I'm really excited to see how that changes the promotional industry. This fight was originally scheduled for back in July, but unfortunately Mike Tyson had an ulcer flare-up that was really severe, so it had to be rescheduled until now. The ulcer flare-up brings up the main crux of this fight, which is that it's a more inexperienced, younger fighter against a much older living legend. Mike Tyson is 58, which is very, very old for a boxer. Nobody is actively fighting at 58. For that reason, there have been a lot of discussions around the ethical implications of this fight and at what point should we impose an age restriction or kind of draw the line. Because Jake Paul is so much younger, he's likely going to have speed on his side as well as cardio and just general strength, whereas Mike Tyson has significantly more experience than Jake Paul and potentially has a lot more single shot power. Like, just take a look at their records here on the bottom to get a sense of their experience difference. It is staggering. Also, as a quick side note, the co-main event on this card, Amanda Serrano versus Katie Taylor, is going to be an absolute banger. This is the second time they're fighting, and the first time they fought, it won the Sports Illustrated Fight of the Year, and it was a really hotly contested fight. So you should definitely watch that one too. Let's start with a quick rundown of Jake the Problem Child Paul. Unfortunately, you probably already know about this man. He got his start as a Vine and YouTube influencer. I think he was also on a Disney Channel show, but he is one of the most successful influencers of all time. And back in 2018, he caught the boxing bug. He started just fighting other influencers, and then it's kind of transitioned to more of a professional venture. And for that reason, he's become a very controversial figure in boxing because he didn't work his way up the traditional way. Because he's such a well-known public figure, his amateur fights were pay-per-views. He does get a lot of criticism for not fighting top-level boxers. He has fought a lot of low to mid-level boxers, some MMA fighters, not really top talent. I would personally say for the number of fights that he's had, he is pretty on track and he is pretty good skill-wise. He's had 11 professional fights, and generally when you're a pro boxer, your first 10 or so fights will be rigged in the sense of it's a matchup that you're probably going to win. It's just a way to pad your record, essentially. And because Jake Paul is such a big name and he's already headlining the pay-per-views at a low skill level, it does make sense to me that he would want to fight, for example, an MMA fighter who also has a big name or is older, but isn't necessarily the highest level of skill in boxing. Jake Paul knows that he's a controversial figure, and he does lean into it by playing the heel or the bad guy in the promos up to the fights. His brother is Logan Paul, and if you're one of the girlies, he had that highly publicized marriage back in 2019 that was like streamed for money with Tana Mojo. That was crazy. It was the vibe at the time. If we're talking about fight style, Jake Paul does have a lot of power. He'll typically use his jab a lot and then go in with an overhand right. Now let's talk about Mike Tyson, and let me tell you guys, it was almost impossible to try to figure out what to put on this slide alone because Mike Tyson is a legend in boxing. He has a lot of nicknames, but he's most commonly referred to as Iron Mike or the baddest man on the planet. Now, if you don't know who Mike Tyson is, you probably do. He has a very recognizable tattoo on his face. He was in movies like Rocky and The Hangover. He's also very famous for biting part of a man's ear off in a fight, so you may have heard of that. And Mike Tyson just has such an interesting story. He had a really difficult childhood. He was arrested like 38 times by the time he was 13. He was always getting into trouble. He started training boxing when he was in juvie, and around that time he met Customato, who was going to become his friend, mentor, coach, all in one. When Tyson's mom died when he was a teenager, Customato became Tyson's legal guardian. And let me tell you, Cus saw the vision in Tyson and he ran with it. Tyson became the youngest heavyweight champion ever at like 20 20 years old, and he was just insanely dominant. He was knocking everybody out. Tyson's knockout rate is like 88%. He was the undisputed world heavyweight champion from 1987 to 1990. Now, part of what makes Mike Tyson's story so interesting is that for a lot of his life, he fit the bill of a very violent fighter. He was known for being kind of aggressive and hot-headed, and he has been involved in a lot of scandals. Most notably, he was convicted of sexual assault in a highly publicized case and went to prison for it. Now, when it comes to this case in particular, Mike has always maintained his innocence. However, he would be the first person to tell you that he did a lot of bad stuff when he was younger, so even though he was innocent in that case, he probably still deserved to be in prison. However, it does appear that he has really worked on himself, and if you see Mike Tyson now, if you listen to some of his interviews, he really comes across as a gentle giant. I actually really encourage you to listen to some of his interviews because he comes across as like a child. And I don't mean that in a bad way at all. I mean, he is very genuine. He is I don't think he puts a lot of things he says through filters, and he's very, very curious about the world around him. Also, that man loves special mushrooms, and he will talk about it every chance he gets. He has tried to give back. He started the Mike Tyson Cares Foundation back in 2012. Also, our last fun fact here is that Mike is really into pigeons. Like, that's his thing. The man loves pigeons. He has like hundreds of them that he takes care of all the time. It's very funny. Also, hi, my name's Kennedy. I am a little baby creator here on YouTube. I just started my channel. However, I have some established communities on here. You can find me in these places. If you feel like being a homie, I'd really appreciate you helping me grow my channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. That would be amazing.